The marble halls of the Capitol echoed with the familiar shuffle of pressed suits and hurried staffers, but today the air was different. Heavier. Tense. Senator J.D. Vance stood still in the hallway outside courtroom 4B of the Federal Judiciary Committee. The subpoena had arrived 3 days ago, signed with the judge's personal seal. The hearing was officially about funding disputes within the Department of Veterans Affairs. Unofficially, everyone knew it was about something else, silencing voices that had grown too loud. Vance hadn't said a word to the press since receiving the order. Not a tweet, not a statement, not a whisper. His silence only made the media frenzy louder. "Senator, will you be testifying on behalf of the Ohio Vets Network?" a CNN reporter barked. "Did you really say the Secretary of Veterans Affairs should be removed?" asked a woman from NBC. J.D. said nothing. He adjusted the worn leather folder under his arm. Inside were 37 letters, every one of them handwritten by a veteran who had reached out to his office in the past 6 months. Some were about delays, others about denials, a few about funerals. At the door, a marshal in navy blue opened it slowly. "Senator Vance," he nodded. "They're waiting." Inside, the room buzzed with anticipation. News crews, congressional aides, families of veterans, many seated in quiet defiance, wearing faded uniforms and holding photos of sons and daughters who didn't make it home. J.D. stepped in, his boots echoing against the stone floor. The chair reserved for him sat alone at the center of the room. Behind the bench sat Judge Marjorie Holwell, stern, composed, and known for brooking no drama in her courtroom. She adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "Let the record reflect. Senator James David Vance is present. This hearing will come to order." J.D. sat down and placed the leather folder in front of him. "Senator Vance," Judge Holwell began, her tone clipped, "you are here because of serious allegations regarding your interference in budgetary allocations, your public criticisms of federal institutions, and, most controversially, your claim that the government has, in your words, abandoned those who wore the uniform." J.D. didn't flinch. His eyes were fixed on hers. "You may respond, but do so carefully," she added, with the faintest smirk. "This court is not a campaign stage." J.D. leaned in toward the microphone, slowly, calm, controlled. "Your Honor," he said, "if this isn't a campaign stage, good, because this isn't about politics, it's about promises." The room went silent. He opened the folder and pulled out the first letter. J.D. held the folded sheet gently, as though the paper itself carried weight beyond ink and fiber. His voice was even, not raised, yet it rang through the chamber like a bell. "This letter," he began, "is from Sergeant Lucas Hart, U.S. Marine Corps, retired, served in Fallujah, 2 tours, 3 Purple Hearts. He wrote me this, after waiting 9 months for a prosthetic limb that was supposed to be covered by his VA benefits." J.D. cleared his throat and began reading. "Dear Senator Vance, I don't need pity. I need a leg. I earned it. I fought for it. I bled for this country, and now I've got more red tape than blood left. They tell me they're understaffed, that the system is complex. You know what's complex, sir? Trying to walk your daughter down the aisle on a stump and a promise." J.D. paused. He looked up. That letter was written 6 weeks before Sergeant Hart passed away from an untreated infection. He died with a flag over his casket, but not a foot under his knee. The judge shifted in her seat. A reporter's pen froze mid-word. J.D. placed the letter on the table and picked up the next one. "This one is from Corporal Maria Jensen, Iraq 2007. She wrote to me in January. Here's what she said. I lost my hearing to an IED in Mosul. The VA sent me a denial letter twice. They say the injury wasn't service-related. I was on a convoy, Senator. I've got pictures of the Humvee. They say that's not enough. I live alone. I sleep with a gun under my pillow. I can't hear my own screams at night. I just want someone to hear them for me." J.D.'s voice cracked for just a second, just enough to feel it. 3 weeks ago, she took her own life, he said. She left behind a dog and a note. The room was dead silent. The judge tried to speak, but J.D. kept going. "Judge Holwell, I know why I'm here. You want me to apologize for saying the system is broken. You want me to walk back my words. Well, I'm not here to walk anything back. I'm here to read these letters, every one of them." He held up the stack. 37 veterans, 37 stories, 37 names that this court, this country, and this administration would rather ignore. The judge sat still. No gavel, no objection, just silence. The cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of emotion across JD's face and hers. "I will not be silenced, Your Honor, not when their voices are already gone." And with that, J.D. Vance picked up the next letter. Judge Holwell finally raised a hand. Not a slam of the gavel. Not yet. Just a single motion for stillness. "Senator Vance," she said, her voice sharpened like a blade, "this hearing is not a platform for emotional appeals. The purpose is to determine whether your recent actions constituted a breach of decorum and federal limits regarding—" J.D. didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. But he leaned forward, voice low and steel-edged. "Respectfully, Your Honor, what's more indecorous, raising my voice for veterans or ignoring them until they die?" A quiet gasp fluttered through the back row. Someone, maybe a veteran's widow, nodded, slow and solemn. Judge Holwell straightened. "You are here under allegations of improperly influencing policy decisions through unofficial channels. And I'll do it again," J.D. said, cutting in, "because the official channels have left these men and women to rot." The judge's brows rose. "So you admit it?" "I admit I met with directors off record. I admit I showed up uninvited to 3 VA hospitals. I admit I posted a video showing mold on the walls of the Cincinnati clinic where Vietnam veterans are being treated for lung infections from Agent Orange exposure. And I admit I told every American who would listen that our veterans are not being cared for. They're being abandoned." He rose from his chair. "I admit that." The gallery stirred. Cameras caught every second. Phones recorded. Live streams ticked upward. "Let me ask you something, Your Honor," J.D. continued, stepping forward. "What does this court consider improper? Speaking out loud about the suicide rate among veterans, or letting the rate keep climbing while everyone stays politely quiet?" The judge hesitated. She tried to respond, but J.D. beat her to it. "I'm not disrespecting the system," he said. "I'm demanding it live up to the oath it took, the same way our veterans did." He reached down, pulled out another letter. "This one is from Staff Sergeant Chris Delaney. He didn't ask for benefits. He asked for dignity." He wrote, "They asked me to carry a rifle for America. I did. Now I ask them to carry me when I'm broken, but they can't be bothered." J.D. looked up, the weight of it in his eyes. "You want to punish me for reading that? Fine. But you'll have to listen to all of them first." The judge leaned back, visibly unsettled. The courtroom was no longer hers, and everyone knew it. Before Judge Holwell could respond, a voice called from the back of the gallery. "Let him speak." It was an older man, maybe late 60s, with a weathered Marine Corps pin on his collar and a face carved by time. He stood without permission, hands clenched by his sides. "He's telling the truth," the man said. "My son died waiting for a prescription refill. Took 9 months. 9! You want to talk about protocol? Let's talk about that." A bailiff started to move toward him, but J.D. raised a hand, not to command, but to acknowledge. "What's your name, sir?" J.D. asked. "Alan Brower, gunnery sergeant, retired. My son's name was Mitch." J.D. nodded. "Then Mitch's story is next." He flipped through the folder, found the right page. "I don't blame anyone anymore," Mitch had written. "I just want to go somewhere I don't feel forgotten. I want my dad to stop pretending I'm okay when he looks me in the eye." J.D. looked up. He wrote that 2 weeks before his heart stopped in his sleep. No autopsy, no apology, just a folded flag. The room was still again, but the silence had changed. It was no longer tension, it was mourning, a sacred collective stillness. J.D. turned to the judge. "See, Your Honor, this isn't just paperwork. These are lives. These letters, they're not political statements. They're final words. Unanswered prayers, echoes from people this system pretended not to hear." More people were rising in the gallery now. A woman in nurse scrubs, tears in her eyes, held up a photo of a young man in uniform. Another wore a Gulf War hat and clutched his chest as if bracing against memories too heavy to name. "I understand decorum," J.D. said, "but I also understand desperation." The judge leaned into her microphone. "This is a court of law. I will not have it turned into a rally." "It already is one," J.D. replied, "because when justice stops listening, people rally. That's what this is. That's why you subpoenaed me, not because I broke the law, but because I broke the silence." A reporter at the back whispered, "He's going viral right now." A staffer's phone buzzed. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. The feeds were exploding. J.D. stepped back. "Let me ask the room," he said, voice deep and resolute. "Do you want me to keep reading?" The answer wasn't applause. It wasn't shouting. It was a quiet, unanimous chorus of nods. Judge Hallwell gripped the bench like she was holding back a flood. J.D. picked up the next letter, but this time he didn't read it right away. Instead, he looked the judge square in the eye. "How many stories do you need to hear before you start believing them?" The room was packed wall to wall, and yet no one shifted in their seat. There was no whispering, no coughing, no scrolling, just silence, and J.D. Vance still standing, still holding the next letter like it was scripture. "This one," he began, "never made it to me in time." He held up a crumpled envelope. "It was returned to sender. The veteran passed away before it could be delivered. His wife found it in the mailbox, unopened. She forwarded it to my office." He unfolded the pages, and even the judge leaned forward without realizing it. "My name is Henry Vale, Vietnam, 1971. I've been sober 20 years, but lately I've had thoughts I haven't had since the jungle. I hear choppers in my sleep. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm 19 again and under fire. The VA says I'm too old to qualify for extended trauma care, says the funding's been cut. I don't want to die a burden, but I feel like one." J.D. exhaled. He never got a reply. Not from me, not from the VA, not from the country he wore the uniform for. There was a faint sound, not from J.D., not from the judge, but from somewhere in the gallery, a woman sobbing quietly into her hands, another vet beside her, stoic but shaking. J.D. let the silence hang. Then he did something no one expected, something the cameras caught from every angle. He stepped away from the podium, walked past the front row, and handed the letter to Henry Vale's widow. "It belongs to you now," he said, "but I promise the world will hear it." The room, which had been under the strict gavel of protocol moments earlier, broke free of it completely. A man in army fatigues rose to his feet, then another and another. The judge slammed her gavel once, twice. "Order," she barked. But it was too late. The gallery was standing, not chanting, not shouting, just standing, in stillness, in reverence. "You think this is a performance," J.D. said, turning back to the judge. "It's not. It's the reckoning of a nation that told its warriors they were heroes, then treated them like paperwork." Judge Hallwell looked around the courtroom, her courtroom, now reclaimed by the people it had long ignored. Her voice dropped low, more hesitant than before. "I sympathize with these stories, Senator, but you must understand, the court cannot fix the Department of Veterans Affairs." J.D. turned back to her, steady. "No, Your Honor, but it can listen, and it can decide not to punish the one man who finally said what no one else would." He took his seat again. "Calm. Your move." The judge slammed the gavel once more, not with fury this time, but desperation. A gavel without authority is just a wooden echo. Everyone in the room felt it. "This hearing is suspended for 10 minutes, she announced sharply, rising from her seat and retreating into chambers without another word. J.D. remained seated, but the moment the judge left, reporters pounced. "Senator, do you expect criminal charges? Is this your campaign moment? Did you coordinate this demonstration?" He looked at them, almost disappointed. "I didn't coordinate anything," J.D. said. "I just stopped pretending." Inside the judge's chambers, the mood was a different beast. Judge Hallwell paced in front of 2 advisers and a clerk who looked ready to evaporate under her glare. "This is spiraling," she hissed. "He's turned my courtroom into a soapbox for moral grandstanding." "Ma'am," one of the aides said quietly, "the stream has over 3 million viewers, and climbing. TikTok clips are already trending. He's not just winning the room, he's winning the country." Hallwell stopped. "So what? I'm supposed to let him hijack the federal process?" "No," the clerk said nervously, "but if you silence him now, you'll look like you're silencing veterans by proxy. That's political suicide." The judge sat heavily in her chair, hand to her temple. This was supposed to be a simple slap on the wrist, a censure. Now we've got mothers weeping on camera and a senator quoting ghost letters like he's a prophet. "What do you want to do?" her aide asked. She didn't answer, just stared at the wall. Back in the courtroom, J.D. pulled something else from his briefcase, a small framed photo, grainy, black and white, of a man in uniform. "My grandfather," he said aloud, addressing no one in particular. "James Donald Vance, born in 1923, fought in World War II, came home with nothing but a duffel bag and a limp, spent the rest of his life working in a factory that gave him cancer." He looked directly into one of the cameras. We were told America takes care of its own. He died waiting for that promise to cash in. One of the younger staffers in the room, barely 25, wiped her eyes quietly in the corner. She'd come expecting a procedural slap, not a national reckoning. I'm not here for pity, JD continued. I'm here to remind this country that its soul is measured not by how we treat celebrities or CEOs, but how we treat the people who sacrificed everything and came home with nothing. The door at the front creaked open. Judge Hallwell returned. Her face was unreadable, composed. But her eyes had changed. She sat down, and she didn't reach for the gavel. Judge Hallwell sat for a long moment before speaking. Her hands rested on the bench, but she didn't touch the gavel. Senator Vance, she said slowly, this court recognizes the emotional gravity of what's been shared today, but it also recognizes the boundaries of judicial proceedings. JD tilted his head, waiting. However, she added, in light of new context, she glanced subtly at her clerk, the court is prepared to allow a temporary extension of your statement, limited to the remaining contents of your folder. The room stirred. No judge ever granted extensions to someone subpoenaed under suspicion. JD didn't smile. He simply opened the folder again. This next one, he said, comes from a 22-year-old specialist named Caleb Winters. He didn't write from a hospital. He wrote from a tent in Syria. Senator, I know I'm not supposed to complain. They tell us to suck it up. But I've had 4 buddies discharged in the past 6 months with 0 support. One of them came home, started living in his car. Another tried calling the suicide line, got a busy signal. Twice. I'm still over here fighting, but it's like the battle never ends. It just changes uniforms. JD paused, looked around. That letter came in 2 months ago. Yesterday I learned Specialist Winters was medevaced after a mortar strike. He's alive, but both legs are gone. He placed the letter on the stack and looked at the judge. These people aren't pawns. They're not punchlines. They're not hashtags. And if this court thinks I'm out of line for making their voices heard, then I ask you, who exactly is in line? A murmur of agreement flowed through the audience like wind through wheat. I'm not here to burn bridges, JD continued, but I am here to burn the illusion that everything is fine. It's not. We all know it. This court knows it. Washington knows it. The only people who don't pretend are the ones who've already paid the price. He looked directly into the lens of the biggest camera. This is not about me. Then he turned and handed the entire folder to the court stenographer, put it in the record. The stenographer looked at the judge for permission. Hallwell gave a barely perceptible nod. JD sat down. For the first time in the entire hearing, he looked tired, not performative, but real. Heavy with the weight of 37 lives he didn't know but carried anyway. Judge Hallwell tapped her fingers against the bench, then looked up. Do you have any final words, Senator? He stood once more. Just one sentence. We told them we'd never forget. I came here to prove we already have. And just like that, he sat down. The judge stared at him for a long time, but this time she had nothing to say. Not yet. The silence now had a different weight. It wasn't resistance. It was respect. The silence in courtroom 4B felt sacred. Judge Hallwell stared at the stack of letters before her, as if they might suddenly speak on their own. Her fingers hovered over her gavel, then dropped away. Instead of slamming it, she did something that would later be replayed on every news channel in America. She took off her glasses. Senator Vance, she said softly, I lost my husband 22 years ago. Gulf War. He made it home, but he didn't come back. Not really. JD's eyes narrowed slightly, listening. He struggled quietly. He was one of those veterans who wore a smile to keep everyone else from worrying, but I saw the cracks. A few reporters lowered their cameras, caught off guard. He never wrote a letter, the judge continued, never filed a complaint. He believed, as many did, that asking for help was weakness, and when he finally did, when the system finally acknowledged him, it was too late. She looked down at the letters JD had placed on the desk. I wanted this hearing to be a statement, she said, but I didn't realize whose statement it would become. She looked him in the eye. You've made your point. The courtroom held its collective breath. But this hearing cannot proceed as originally intended. The allegations against you were based on a belief that your actions were disruptive, disrespectful to federal order. But now, I see they were disruptive in the way truth always is. Uncomfortable, loud, and absolutely necessary. A ripple moved through the gallery. Some wept, others nodded in disbelief. "I cannot issue a reprimand today," Holwell continued. "Not in good conscience, because this hearing, this moment, has become something larger than precedent." She looked toward the gallery. "Courtroom 4B will recess. This file will be entered into the official congressional record, and the charges of procedural misconduct against Senator James David Vance will be dismissed, effective immediately." The room exhaled. And then applause, slow, rising, uncontrolled, not from JD, not from the veterans, from their families, their children. The ones who had waited, who had watched quietly as the nation forgot, and who now, for one moment, felt seen. Judge Holwell stood up and began to leave, but just before disappearing behind the chamber door she turned back. "Senator," she said, "don't stop reading." JD didn't reply. He didn't have to. He just placed a hand on the folder and nodded once. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the moment hadn't ended. Outside the federal courthouse, hundreds had gathered. Some held signs. Some held photos. Others just stood in quiet solidarity. When J.D. Vance emerged, he didn't raise a fist or wave to the cameras. He simply walked down the steps, still carrying the empty folder, its contents now embedded forever into the congressional record. Reporters swarmed him, mics and phones in hand. "Senator Vance, will you introduce legislation after this? Are you planning to run for higher office? What's your message to the administration?" He stopped at the bottom step, turned. "My message?" he said. He took out one last letter, the only one he hadn't read. He held it up. "This one came in yesterday. It's not from a veteran. It's from a 12-year-old girl in Iowa. Dear Senator Vance, my brother was in the Army. He used to tell me bedtime stories about saving people. He died last year. The Army gave us a flag. I liked the flag, but I miss him more. Can you tell the people in charge to remember him for real? Not just with flags." JD folded it slowly. "That's my message." He handed the letter to a nearby veteran's widow and stepped away from the podium. The clip would go viral within hours. Millions watched, not because of outrage, but because of something much rarer, a sense that someone finally said the quiet part out loud. Meanwhile, in Washington, reactions were erupting. On cable news, the story dominated coverage. Senator Vance confronts federal system with raw testimony from veterans, receives unexpected vindication. A roundtable debate on one network included a host saying he didn't just win the hearing, he changed the conversation. Lawmakers scrambled to issue statements, some supporting Vance's actions, others calling it grandstanding. But the people weren't confused. They were moved. Across social media, thousands of veterans began sharing their own stories, using the hashtag letters they ignored. Photos, memories, testimonies that had long gone unread. In a diner in Cleveland, a woman turned to the man at the next booth and said, "That senator, he read my husband's name. We never thought anyone would." In a hospital in Phoenix, a nurse on break played the video for a Vietnam vet with a trembling hand. He watched the whole thing, eyes glassy. At the end, he whispered, "About damn time." And in small towns across the country, where folded flags sit on mantles next to photos with uniforms and medals, people sat in silence. But not the same silence as before. This one was different. This one heard something. 2 days after the hearing, the official transcript was published in full. But it wasn't the court's version that went viral. It was a video, handheld, a little shaky, filmed by a veteran's teenage son in the gallery. He had uploaded it to TikTok with a simple title, "He Read My Dad's Letter." Within 48 hours it hit 20 million views, then 50, then 100. In a Senate hearing 3 weeks later, J.D. Vance sat again, but this time not under subpoena, this time at the head of the table. A joint session of the Veterans Affairs and Judiciary Committees had convened, not to investigate him, but to listen to him. He brought the folder again, now thicker, filled with hundreds of new letters. Each one read aloud, one by both Republican and Democrat lawmakers who had once dismissed his concerns. The headlines told a new story now. Senators' stand sparks National Veteran Reform Initiative. Congress moves to audit VA after viral courtroom hearing. Letters become law, the Vance Amendment gains traction. But the most powerful moment didn't happen in D.C., it happened in a quiet cemetery in Kentucky. J.D. stood by a grave, his grandfather's, not a crowd, no cameras, just him, and one letter. He folded it gently and laid it down near the headstone. "James Donald Vance," he said aloud. "You didn't get the care you earned, but maybe the next guy will." He stood up, looked to the sky, and whispered, "We're not done." Across the nation, plaques were placed at VA clinics bearing a single quote. We told them we'd never forget. "I came here to prove we already have. Senator J.D. Vance." Underneath each plaque was a small bronze plate that read, "In memory of the unheard, may we never be silent again."